Our guest on this episode of Long Play is an absolute institution in the jazz genre and one of the most storied musicians in any genre, period. He's the most recorded jazz bassist in history, releasing countless brilliant albums as a band leader and being an essential part of recordings with the likes of many legendary artists, including Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, McCoy Tyner, Chet Baker, Jimmy Smith, Gil Scott-Heron, Eric Dolphy, Eddie Harris, amongst many others. And of course, our focus of today's episode, A Tribe Called Quest. Mr. Carter, it's an absolute honor to have you. How you doing?
Given the time of day and the sun is, I'm not sure where you are, but in New York, the sun is shining brightly. So we're all having a good day in New York, man.
Yeah, I'm in Boston, and I spent
That
the
doesn't count.
majority of not too far away, stone's throw. Sat on the porch most of my morning though, so
Good for you. Yeah,
the
it's time.
sun has been absolutely gorgeous.
Let the sun heal some wounds, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need right now. But speaking of healing wounds, how has navigating this pandemic as a musician, especially one that clearly likes to record and play live as much as you, how has it been this past year?
Very difficult. I was talking to one of my friends this morning. I have six. I talked to one of my six friends this morning, and we lamented the fact that our routine stopped existing about 13 months ago, actually. We haven't played together since February, you know. That was a month before everything else shut down officially, you know. And we were expressing our concern as to whether the jazz clubs, as we knew them, would still be in happening, going on. And we acknowledged to much our dismay that several clubs had closed in the meantime and several were looking kind of grim. And we hoped that by the time the state allowed them to have more than 25 or 50 customers in their place, that they'd be able to make enough money to hire a band and kind of get out of the hole that this pandemic has put us all in. But it's nice talking to another adult, and we had some pretty good conversation. Yeah.
I mean, those small things I feel like go for so much now.
And that's a long time.
Yeah, you're right. That's nice to hear, but it's been a crazy time and especially difficult for you, it sounds like, in your band. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about your storied career as we get along here. But like I mentioned, the focus here on our episode today is on A Tribe Called Quest, the Low End Theory. Can you tell us how you were approached to appear on this album, a hip hop album of all things? I've heard that your son gave the group a stamp of approval, and there was a bit of a process there. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of hear from you about that.
Well, I was teaching at City College at the time, and I get home from school at about 4:30, and my machine has a person left me a message about a recording session. So I called back, and I called Mr. Q-Tip, that was on the other end. He said that he's putting together a record, and he mentioned he's a fan of Charlie Mingus, and he knew the jazz community, and he's trying to hope that I'd be available to help with this project. I said, well, what did you have in mind? And I said, well, I'm booking a studio within the next couple of days or next couple of weeks, and I want you to come by and make part of this record with us. So I said, well, I just walked in from school. My wife took out my briefcase in my hand. Let me put it down and get a glass of water and get back to you. And he said, okay. So I put my briefcase down, got a glass of water, and called my son, who's more aware of the genre than I was specifically. I mean, I knew the music and stuff, but he knew who was what, and he had a whole history of following that stuff from the early days. So he said, yeah, well, there's a guy named Q. He said, well, Dad, they're about the most musical guy of all the hip-hop guys. And if he asks you to join this project, I would say yes, but make sure you get paid. So I said, well, I mean, I'm not, I'm old enough to know how to ask for that. So I got back to him and said, well, and my son told me that your band was the most musically adventuresome of all the hip hop guys out there. He recommended that if the job is still open, that I would take it. So he said, well, it's still open. I said, okay, well, I'll take it. So that was the first step. And once we agreed on the time and the place, and I said, well, Mr. Let me keep out. There's a couple of stipulations that I kind of have in place. One of them is the language skills got to be something I approve of. The vocabulary, and I know what sells. And I'm not that far behind the times. I'm teaching college kids all day who are aware of the scene and that stuff. And I can assure you, Mr. Q-Tip, that I will be parked in front of the studio with my car nearby and the key in the ignition. And once I think the conversation is going sideways, I know that word over that door that says EXIT. Yeah, I know that word. And I've done that before, and I will do it again if the words get somewhere that I can condone them. He said, Mr. Carter, there's no problem, no problem. I said, well, let's meet at the date, then we get it done. So we picked the time and the date, and I actually did park outside the studio. It's 9 o'clock at night in New York. You can park on the street,
Mm-hmm.
or 7 o'clock at night. And I set up inside the control room rather than inside the booth on the other side of the glass. And I said, well, just kind of read the poem to him, read the lines so I know the tenor of the time and how fast it's going and how many big words there are, so I can and what kind of tone center. Everyone's voice has a tone center to it. And one of those things that those hip hop guys don't attach themselves to is that their tracks that they use are somehow is seldom in the same tone relative as their voice.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, if this guy's going to let me do what I do, I can't do that without knowing what their key is, basically. So I want to hear him. So just read it to me one time so I get a sense. So he did, I said, okay, well, I got hooked up. I took my bass out of the case, got in tune, which I usually do. And I said, well, let's get this started, see how we can go. So we did well, 2 or 3 lines so I get the sound in the room. It's a pretty small, just as opposed to the room.
Yeah.
The studio itself is recording us at 1/3 that size. The wall is right here and the glass is right there, in the room. It sounds different, And I don't know how aware they were of how different that affects the sound of the bass in such a small glass room, So they didn't need to know how my feeling. I said, let's give me the sound of the room and we'll see how it feels and we'll get started. So I got in sync with the voice, and I had to read it to me so I know how long it's going to last, so I could build my line according to the highs and lows of his voice and the intensity and the commas and stuff, And I did like 2 or 3 takes, and I said, well, that's it, guys. That's what you asked for. And then they said, well, how do you do that? I said, what? So you came in and played. I said, that's my job. My car is still outside, but the motor's still warm. So you guys just made it. So we said, okay, and I left, and I got paid, And little did I know that record would be considered the seminal record of the decade for that genre of music. I said, wow, I stumbled into a place where I got a little rep. Okay, I can buy that. We've talked. We've been trying to get together for a general conversation since then, but they're still kind of busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm this past year and a half, no one's busy. Everyone's gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was disappointed to see them break up so soon because that was a really good record for them. They really had set the standard of that genre of music. And I don't mean the rap in itself, but
Mm-hmm.
the package. It was a very musical band.
Yeah.
They were studying keyboard and the piano, and they're understanding a major minor chord stuff, real basic stuff that guys, when you're sampling, you just kind of take the sample.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed to see them break up and not really take advantage of the influential place they were put into by this record.
Yeah.
Having said that, they're all really nice guys, and I loved each one of them. And our paths kind of went this way because I was getting busy and they were getting even more famous. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry I didn't stop to maintain a better contact with them because I enjoyed talking with them, and I'm sure they would have enjoyed hearing my various groups play to see what they could do to their sound.
Yeah.
That's the story behind that.
Wow. Well, amazing retelling. It's so interesting to hear how that all went down because you hit on a lot of the things that I think a lot of people love about this album, and it is, I think, very instrumental in the evolution of the hip hop genre. Like you said, not just of just speaking about the rapping, but the whole package.
Yeah.
I think Q-Tip, especially when going into it, really had a mindset of he wanted legitimacy, and he wanted something that could work musically, and you know, not just in that hip hop box.
Yeah.
And you know, that's probably why he gave you a call, and you know, to add some of that legitimacy. And he really tried to bring that jazz aura to the album, to really, I think it was a little bit of a proving point that hip hop could be a little bit more than, you know, what had been sold at the time.
Plus, niggas were dead by then, so it gave me a head start.
Yeah, but you know, it went in the studio with them. I mean, it must have been a totally different beast than recording with, say, other jazz artists. I mean, obviously, you know, two wildly different genres as far as instrumentation goes. But you know, you mentioned the room itself, and you know, I'm trying to match that tone. You know, how does that differ than when you're going in for a recording session for a jazz album?
It's the same. It depends. The biggest difference would be who's responsible for producing the record,
Yeah.
the session. Do they have a concept? Have they hired the best people for the success of this project? Do they have music for the project? How much time do they have for the project? How much patience do they have for the project? Is the project a party for them, or is it a project? All these factors play into what happens in the big room.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are they inviting their friends? Are they inviting their friends to see them work out and see them do their thing? Are they inviting their friends to have a free lunch, literally? They want to hang out and meet the big shots on the other side of the glass. You know, how they want to? Are you going to be stunned because they're there and you hired them? You know, how's the band going to respond to that kind of vibe and that kind of clearly big budget atmosphere that jazz records seldom have? Here you have a chance to. These guys book the studio for 3 or 4 days, and you can kind of go in there and not have anything to do but twirl your thumbs until they decide when they're ready and what kind of sound they want. It's a whole nother vibe. That the air, the emotional air is different, you know. Other than those few real clear differences, I'm going to work, and it doesn't matter where it is. I got my lunch pail, so to speak, you know, shaped like a bass, you know, not too far away, and let's go to work.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly no stranger to the studio, so I'm sure you have your own kind of way of doing it down pat by now, and your own routine, no matter who you're going in there for.
Yeah, well, you know, Mike, I'm always surprised when I get these calls from people who are not known in the jazz industry. You know, to be a fan is kind of one thing. Okay, that's what they help us work. But to be an artist who has this producer who has a pretty broad view of music with a capital M, and this view crosses the musical borders, that he wants his client to be involved with another angle of this music that he's known for, that his management knows these people because they're clearly older than the talent, perhaps, you know. One of my students turned me on to a record I had made in 1977 with Kate Taylor. You know who she is?
I am not familiar immediately, but
That's James Taylor's sister.
Wow.
You know, and I'm on a record with her with Steve Ferrone, the drummer with Every White Band, and Richard T, and all these guys who are fantastic players, but I never saw them playing at Birdland, you know. But the producer of this day, whoever he was, knew that I was, you know, a guy who might help their project, whatever they had in mind, you know. And this is 9 years after I left the Miles Davis Band. So whoever the producer was, they must have a pretty good record collection, or trust someone else to remember that this guy over who plays bass with Miles, maybe he can help you do something for your project, you know. So again, that those people call me after all the choices they have is always a humbling experience, knowing that I'm one of the choices that they picked to help their project get to somewhere.
Yeah.
And they hope that I can be the guy who makes that happen.
Yeah. And a
My
lot of
job,
people have given you the call.
my job's to prove them right.
I would definitely agree with that. But along with you on that album, specifically on Low End Theory, you played live double bass, but your bass playing was also sampled on another song in the album. What are your thoughts on when hip hop artists sample your music and just sampling in general? I know it's probably something you have mixed feelings about, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, most of those things are done in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and transportation from point A to point B is so simple these days. It's not a problem to get somebody to come to California or Nashville or wherever the studio is booking this specific hip hop act, for example. And number one, and two, that the producers and kids, whoever they are, they must have listened to a lot of bass playing to decide that my track in this case would be what the record needs. And I cannot imagine listening to that many hours of bass player decide that this is what we're looking for, this scratch for this guy who's going to take part of it and use his record. The third thing is if they'd call me, I could have played live and been even better than that. And fourthly, I got to sue them to get paid and not even playing with them.
I mean, that's nice. That part about it is great for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, but no, I'm looking to get better playing what I do.
Yeah.
I'm not ducking the music because they only got two guys and a record player. I can make that stuff work too. Trust me.
You proved it.
Yeah.
I mean, on the same album that you were sampled, you played it live too. So
Yeah. So it gets a little disconcerting that they are not comfortable to expand their view of music as they do their vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
They talk on some difficult subjects, and it's not my language skills, but they touch on some really serious social issues. Why would you want to not have and again, this is not to not give them credit for how hard their job is. I mean, to sink this bass line into a track and find how much you need to make it work, and with the records, I mean, it's just amazing that job that it takes to make that work. For 1/3 of the time you would spend for doing that, just call that guy and have him do what he did even better than the record, with a better sound. With you have more command of what he's going to do. And you pay him and it's done. It's not calling your lawyers. No, it's just foolish. That just a chance to have those guys hear another sound, another tone of the music in the background.
Yeah.
I like those kind of challenges. And so when I get these calls from people who are not part of the Birdland fan club or the Blue Note, I say, well, how did this guy hear about me? And I stop asking. I just ask, what time is it?
Well, I think your influence is certainly spread past Birdland and Blue Note, and you're out in hip hop. You're on a Billy Joel album at some point. You're definitely James Taylor's sister. I mean, you're definitely out across many genres. So people have heard you, I think, in one place or another, and probably a lot different than when you anticipated when you first started your career, I'm sure.
Well, I had no intentions at all. I just want to play good, and it turns out that playing good was valuable in New York.
It seems to be. It certainly was. We're still talking to you today. But like I said, A Tribe Called Quest, they were really out to prove the parallels between jazz and hip hop. I know there's a lot of differences, but thinking of things like improvisation is one thing that comes to mind. But do you think there are similarities between the two genres? Once you think about it.
Well, I appreciate their curiosity of what's the best drum beat to manufacture with their tools.
Mm.
I admire the number of hours listening that it takes to assemble someone else's track and make it fit with your concept and your mood.
Mm.
That just really fascinates me. I think that the third thing is that how do you control the sample piece enough make it feel like it really belongs there, you know. And they're a master at that, man. You know, they have the right hooks, you know, the right volume, you know, the right presence. I mean, that just that assembling of the project that itself is amazing to me. Uh, they have the budget.
Mhm.
The jazz community has never had that kind of budget.
Yeah.
You know, we would go on there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we would leave when the date was over. You know, with 9 to 2, 9 to 12, 1 to 4, something like that, with an hour over. When we left, the project is finished. There's no coming back and fixing 8 measures of this stuff. You know, ultimately it got to that skill level for the jazz community as well. But initially, we just go in there and play our brains out and leave it all out there for the day, and come back and try try to find some more somewhere. You know. But there's a connection, you know, and I hope they continue to be curious as to how they do that, and they begin to step outside of their personal comfort zone and see if someone can play live with them, how would that affect what they do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lady named Jane Cortez. She's passed away. She had a group called the Fire Splitters or something like that, a really good poet.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a record with her. And she would tell me, man, when you play those notes, my voice is different, you know? Oh, she's the late wife of Melvin Edwards, a great sculptor, you know. And yeah, I mean, she had Ornette Coleman had a studio midtown up in Harlem, and I spent a couple of hours making a record with her, and it really came out nice. You know, she had some questions about how I do what I do, and some suggestions maybe I should do this or maybe I should do that, and I found out where her pitch was, her tone center was, you know, and I was able to meet most of her needs, and she understood that while she was in charge, she wasn't completely in charge, you know, and she trusted my judgment. Said, I'm not sure that that's going to work, but if I do like this, maybe it's better for you, and certainly it's better for my hands. So let's try that. So she was curious about that kind of stuff. You know, she's really trying to mix the two.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that the generation who's now uh, really into that genre will sit down and say, well, what else is available to us short of scratching records and sampling stuff? You know, they've made some attempts with Wallace Roney. A couple of guys have had sampling guys with them, but I think that no one took them seriously, so it didn't have the impact it could have had.
Yeah.
You know? It's too bad because Wallace, my late friend, was a fantastic player and had some great ideas. For one reason or another, it didn't get the kind of airtime that other things I thought weren't as quality music as I would like to hear being responsible for.
Yeah.
But it pays your money, it takes your choice, you know.
That's very true. And you know, and if anyone is in the hip hop genre listening, you need to call some more jazz artists to get them in
Yeah,
the
please.
studio.
Yeah, they'll tell you.
Call Ron
Yeah,
Carter. He's here.
I will answer the phone after the third ring.
Hopefully people are still patient these days. I think after waiting around for now over a year or so, I think hopefully they are.
What else they got to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you've been recording nearly your entire life. I mean, what about it continues to make your hair stand up and gets you excited about recording and going and performing still? I mean, you've logged your hours, you've done your time. I think you've made quite a legacy. And what still gets you excited about doing what you do?
Now go into the studio and get a great recorded sound of the bass.
Mm-hmm.
When the engineer and the room and the bass is all in the same location, and when I play a note, and I hear it back in the control room, it sounds like I'm still playing that note. That makes my hair. That now I have some with this afro with no haircut. That on the gig is when before we stopped working, before this intermission took over, I like to call it this 13-month intermission. I would announce to the audience that unless you've been here for the past 2 nights or past 2 sets, this night may seem fine to you. But I've been here for the past 2 nights because that's what I do with this band. And my job is to announce to you that you have just seen something very special. And how special is enough for me to have you understand that these people here tonight on the bandstand reach a height every night. But this night, it's otherworldly. And they should have you know, I should have you know that they're in that space right now. Thank you and good night. So it's those moments.
Yeah.
We all play so far above our normal, very high level.
Hmm.
And I think we all strive for that moment, man. And when we get it, they want to share with someone other than on the bandstand. We hope that the audience doesn't think we're being egotistical or talking over their heads, but they're part of this process because they're here assisting in this new level that may be reached, depending on how often we work, as often as possible we try, you know?
Yeah. And, I've listened to a few of your live albums, and some of you spurred off little bits of wisdom that I just love hearing. I'm a person that loves to experience music on vinyl, especially jazz. I know you had a live album recorded in Stockholm that came out as a special release for Record Store Day last year. I've been listening to that. I wish I grabbed it on vinyl. I've been listening to it on online.
Okay, I tell you what, if you give me how to reach you, I'll make that happen.
That would be amazing. I'd love that.
But before you listen to it, you have a good turntable, I guess?
I do. I do.
Okay, you have to, before you put it on, get a pillow or get a seat so you can run to this chair and sit down before you put the needle on the record because it's going to knock you out. And I don't want to be responsible for your personal injury.
See, you're taking rid of the liability all right there.
Yes.
No, but I mean,
Print.
I'd love to hear it in the way it should be heard. I mean, other than being there itself, but when speaking to the audience, I mean, after listening to it, right before jumping into a rendition of My Funny Valentine, you mentioned that the song is dedicated to those folks that have left the concert, which I thought was a perfect euphemism. And I rewinded it because I was like, oh wow, that's perfect. And it got me thinking, personally about that whole concept of leaving the concert. And when you leave the concert, what is the legacy that you hope that you've left behind?
Lowercase a, he was a nice person. Lowercase b, he continued to look for the best notes. Lowercase c, he had some great clothes. And lowercase d, he played so well that he's making us miss him.
Hey, and if you're remembered for those four things, I would say you left the concert in a pretty good spot. I'd just be happy with, oh, that guy. I think that would be all right for that's my lowercase a through z.
Well, somewhere
I remember him.
Yeah. Somewhere I may be that, and that's okay too.
Yeah, but no, I certainly think you deserve all of that and more. And I'm definitely going to reach out to you with some with my contact info. And
you do that, and I'll take care of
it. That would be amazing. I would love.
You got to do what I ask you to do first, though.
Yeah, I got the pillow ready. I'll get two pillows. I'll get two pillows just to make sure.
That's down for the count.
Yep. I'm not getting back up. Now, lastly, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you if you had an album recommendation, whether something of your own or not, that you think deserves more praise and appreciation than maybe it's gotten.
Ooh.
Any genre, any album, it's something I ask a lot of people because this is a podcast about albums. We like to talk about albums.
Well, this is an unusual one. Roberta Flack, bless her heart. Neshwa Erdogan, I think, was the person. She did a memorial service for him at Carnegie Hall when that was necessary. And her band was asked, she was asked to play a song for him at this, in remembrance of him at this memorial service at Carnegie Hall. So she assembled a band, me, I think Buddy Williams playing drums, Silverlight playing keyboards, and she's playing wonderful piano and singing, and she did a version of Always that's not commercially available. But the bass sounded great that day, man, and It was not a professional recording in terms of on-site recordings that they do. And someone recorded and gave me the disc a couple of years ago, and I play it for my students as one way to play a successful bass ballad line. It's just perfect for her, you know. That'd be one. The second would be I did a record of the Bach Brandenburg Number 3, where I'm playing my solos over the Brandenburg normally performed orchestral piece. You know, I'd like people to hear that who haven't heard it, uh, who would think that the jazz community's combination of jazz and classical music doesn't work for them, and in a more pleasant way of saying it. You know.
Mhm.
And while I didn't make this record to prove to the contrary, it does by itself. You know, it's a very well recorded. You hear the sound of the studio, you hear the violins, you feel the music. And what I'm doing with that stuff is, I'm sure Bach, if he was still alive, would say, "Hey man, how do you do that?" You know. I picked those two because they're not very. The Brandenburg is recorded like 12, 15 years ago, and the other is not recorded. But those would be records I would think if you could have someone listen to them, they would be uh, not stunned, but pleasantly taken aback
Yeah.
as to where's this been all my life.
That's the feeling that you search for when you're listening to
Yeah.
music, to be able to get that experience. It looks like I'll have to add another pillow if I'm gonna do some more listening to those.
Yeah, yeah. I'll take care of that for you. Give me how to reach you. Give me your
Yeah,
contact number.
absolutely. Well, Mr. Carter, that's all I got for you. I hope to be on the lookout for more live concert streams. I know at Ron Carter Bassist, you've been posting some stuff on Instagram and on social media,
Yeah.
and doing some streamed concerts while we can't see you in a jazz club, which I wish we could right now. But
Well, we hope that stuff will open up sometime in September, given today. And I went out today, and there are people in the restaurants because it's warm, and
mm,
the number of people who are allowed to go in the restaurants was bigger than it was like a month ago. So New York is opening up a little at a time, and if people are still careful and acknowledge that if they take the vaccination, they'll help this process and wear a mask, the usual things to protect your neighbor from the virus. Uh, September is not that far away.
it isn't.
And we all hope that we get together, we can shake hands and say hello, and we can be a party of a new generation growing up out of this long intermission.
Yeah, I'll be first in line. But it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, Mr. Carter. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down on Long Play, and just know you are always a welcome guest here. So I really appreciate your time.
Okay, offer me another invitation after you hear these two records. Offer me an invitation. We'll come back.
All right, that sounds great.
Okay.